Ted Kascinski, better known by his catchy nickname, the Unabomber, is dead. Supposedly of suicide, but they said the same thing about Jeffrey Epstein, so who knows? Now, Kascinski's crimes were abhorrent to any thinking, feeling person. He blew up essentially innocent people, killing a few, blowing off appendages, and permanently disfiguring many of the recipients. One guy who owned a computer store was a random target, and they said in the article that I read that he was so badly mangled, his family was only allowed to see him from below the knees when they said their goodbyes. I mean, wow. And though it may be relevant that though his entire motivation seems to have been a violent protest against the advancing, omniscient, greedy, anti-human technology that rules our lives, he really didn't target anybody who could actually be responsible for that dystopian downturn disguised as advancement in our society. No Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates on his list, which is interesting, especially in light of recent revelations. And just to be clear, I'm not advocating for violence or pain and suffering or death for anybody. Life is hard enough without getting blown up. And in terms of sinister, pernicious, tech giant Elon Musk, who has ironically expressed admiration for Kascinski, he was a bit younger and didn't start wreaking his havoc until after Kascinski was caught. But hasn't he demonstrated a sociopathic lack of compassion or conscience in trying to destroy society using technology? Wonder what his relationship is to the CIA. Now, Kascinski was a bona fide boy genius, a savant, perhaps autistic on some level, with perhaps a predilection for schizophrenia, perhaps raised in an emotionally withholding household, and of course, none of that justifies his heinous crimes. But here's the interesting part. Kascinski went to Harvard when he was 16, and while there was coerced into subjecting himself to experiments by the CIA, and specifically through their infamous, notorious, nefarious MK Ultra program. You know that program where they subjected unknowing recipients in all kinds of places to all sorts of mentally torturous mind control experiments using chemicals and other means. Now, assuming that's true, and there is enough solid, credible evidence to back it up, he joins an illustrious group of suddenly violent individuals who may have unknowingly carried out, the CIA agenda of violence and mayhem and murder and targeted assassinations against what they perceived to be actual threats to the government and, larger than the government, the entire system. These other individuals may have included Lee Harvey Oswald, Sirhan Sirhan, James Earl Ray. Those might be the big three. But you also have Arthur Bremer, the would-be assassin of extreme right-wing racist but anti-status quo politician, former governor of Alabama, George Wallace, who was running for president at the time and gaining a lot of support, which was perceived as dangerous to the system. And Joseph Paul Franklin, who shot iconoclastic publisher Larry Flynt when he was so willing to subvert the status quo and destroy the corrupt system. You know the corrupt system, the one we still live under today? To reward people with millions of dollars for exposing corrupt public officials or solving the JFK murder. This made Flynt a very dangerous man. He was a capitalist who was willing to use his capital to find out the truth and in doing so, bring down the system. Wallace and Flynt both survived their assassination attempts, but were permanently paralyzed, their impact severely blunted after that. By the way, Larry Flynt's daughter was killed in a mysterious car crash as well. And we are now all too familiar with the CIA's killing of witnesses or people that know too much or are close to people who are about to expose the sordid truth of our power elite. And that's not all. There's now good reason to believe that Mark David Chapman, the assassin of global peace activist and cultural icon John Lennon may have been subjected to the CIA MK-Ultra indoctrination as well. And finally, for now, because new revelations are brought to light all the time, Charles Manson. Yes, Charles Manson himself. Imagine if the murders of Sharon Tate and the others was part of a CIA plot to basically put the kibosh on the incipient revolution of the 60s, which, by the way, was closer than you think, despite the mainstream media's attempts to reduce it and dismiss it as indulgent frivolity. We don't know anything for sure, but not because we don't know. No, Richard Helms, the CIA director in the 70s, destroyed all files relating to MKUltra. So by its very nature, ingeniously relegates these theories to the fringes. But information is like water. It will always find its level. So if someone might ask, what do these seemingly random people have in common? Just tell them there is good evidence that they inadvertently cross paths with possibly the most consistently destructive force in society, the one that has impeded progress not just here, but around the world. Ironically, the CIA and MKUltra. And then be very careful.